Hi everyone, it's Dux again, back here in ESPC in Prague. An amazing, amazing event, and we got this amazing view. The sun's about to set, and I'm so excited right now because we're gonna talk about a topic that everybody needs, but sometimes don't wanna talk about. I wanna talk about the G word, governance for Microsoft Teams. So with me, to get the conversation going, two good friends. I'll have them introduce themselves, and then we'll get the ball rolling. So why don't you get started, Peter?
Peter Sornat, AvePoint, 12 years in the industry, starting from SharePoint through bpost until Office 365.
Yeah. There you go. Jiří?
Okay, hello everybody, I'm Jiří Kubeš, I'm from Škoda Auto. I'm for 8 years in the industry, and in our department we are responsible for the SharePoint and for the collaboration platform and also for the implementation of the Office 365.
And Teams, right? Microsoft
Teams.
All right. You know, we got to talk about Microsoft Teams because everybody wants to talk about that. So let's get the conversation going. So Škoda is obviously one of the biggest brands here in Czech Republic. So where are you with your Teams journey?
Oh, we are at the beginning because we are currently investigating the potential of the teams and the possibilities how to fulfill our company requirements and our IT security and governance requirements for the systems.
So what are some of the topics that are coming up around governance that as you look into Teams, some concerns or challenges that you foresee that's coming?
Okay, that's probably and most importantly the classification of the documents, because we have the internal policies about the classifications and about the storages and everything that is related to the documents. Also, our concerns are about the user management in the teams, because we have the internal centralism point, how to deal with the user management with the groups and how to deal with the rights.
Yeah, because how big is your user base potentially for Teams?
For Teams, approximately 10,000 users.
10,000, right? At least initially, right? And one of the things is, you know, as some of you may know, out of the box, anybody can create a team. When they create a team, they create channels, and then don't even get us started with private channels. So there's a lot of those concerns. Now, Peter, as you've mentioned, you work in this industry for a long time. A lot of the issues and concern that he brought up is not unique to Teams, right?
Yes.
We've seen this in SharePoint on-prem, bpost, Office 365. Yep. So is this quite typical with some of the customers you work with around Europe? Some of these concerns and challenges?
Absolutely, 100%. These are the probably most common challenges mentioned by the customers that I work with over the years. So
and you work with a lot of large and different size customers, right?
Absolutely. Customers like 250,000 users, 150,000 users, but also as much smaller customers as well. I think it's the challenge is it's quite the same for everyone, really.
You know what I found too, and I've been in this industry since 2001, 2002, the word governance is nothing new, right? We heard about SharePoint governance for a long time. But I think the challenge now is, unlike in the past, SharePoint is one technology. You know, you give people a governance document, make sure you follow. Office 365, it's good, but it's huge. It's quite complex. I mean, asking people to remember every single thing that they should do and not do is next to impossible, right? To me, our roles and responsibilities for this is how do we make it easy for people to do the right thing? That's our job, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's the balance between obviously the adoption and then the control as well, because that brings the control. The lack of control is it's obviously it's one of the key challenges, and also pushing the accountability over the ownership as well, right, and permission and access to the business, but in non-intrusive way. Right,
because you don't want IT to deal every support ticket. Hey, what happened? I got locked out, or I need a new owner. So let's talk about, you know, something more practical, right? So when we think about governance, obviously everybody sometimes gets scared because, oh, this is too big. If we want to zero in to 3 core areas of governance around Teams and Office 365, what 3 areas would you recommend people focus on? So maybe, Peter, you can start.
The first one, and I guess the most important one, is the one that drives the adoption, right? So we need to deliver, in my experience and working with a lot of customers, we need to deliver as ideally a ready service, pre-configured service that users can consume. When you provision, people can consume on demand, and it's in the context of the role of the location department and so on, right?
So from that perspective, in your organization, how are you thinking about provisioning? Would you let them do self-service, create their own teams, or do a request? How would that work?
in our organization that needs to work based on the request because we need to fulfill the ISO standards and ISO certification, so we cannot think about the self-service and self-contents.
Right.
But I think for other organization, the self-care is really important because the users can do it rapidly and quickly. And I think that this is also one part of the great adoption of any software like Teams or anything else.
So when that request comes in, so let's walk that through. So I assume the request comes in, IT gets the request, and based on the request, if you want to provision it, then based on their use case, right? Oh, they're HR, they have personal information, GDPR. Then you go start creating, I guess, the team with all the settings and whatnot, and then you deliver it back to them, right? And say, okay, here's your team. Can that be automated?
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess we can use PowerShell for that or other means.
Yes, again, we have points, so we provide a solution, a framework that automates the provisioning and at the same time on the back end brings all the governance at the source from the point of creation in the background.
And IT still knows it though, right?
Absolutely, it's reportable, it's auditable, yeah, absolutely.
So that way we will pretty much don't let IT be the bottleneck, and there's need an approval process. Let's say I'm in HR, I make a request, like you said, empower the business, it could go to my boss, right?
Yep.
So yeah, so think about governing provisioning from self-service, but if it's not self-service, you want to do a request, think of a way to automate that too. Because the last thing you want, 10,000 people requesting every other day, and that's not your full-time job, right? So now let's look at the second layer of governance. Once it's provisioned, now you have teams. What happens next? So how are you thinking about once you provision teams, or even today with SharePoint, right? What's the governance you have around site owners and site users or teams owners, or how do you make sure they're doing the right thing?
Okay, there has to be the internal training.
Got it.
For current technologies, for example, for SharePoints, we have the internal training, and I think that we are doing pretty well.
Good.
In that, and I think that the users that go through this training are using the technology for their best and for the best of the technology. Also, I think that it's not about the personal training. Also, we can use some webinars, we can use some e-learnings on demand. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that for the great adoption, the spreading of the news and of the information to the end user is really critical, because you can have a pretty nice software, you can have a pretty nice system with a lot of features, but if nobody knows how to use it, or if the user have wrong habits with the system, then you are using only the part of only the small percent of the functionality that the system can deliver, and I think it's pity.
Got it. So Peter, what are some of the issues you see or you hear from customers once they're using this now, they're using Teams? What are some of the governance challenges that they're facing?
I guess sprawl is probably the biggest one.
Which one?
A sprawl.
Sprawl.
Absolutely.
Oh, I need a team for this, a team for that, a SharePoint site for this.
Absolutely. People create teams left, right, and center, which is great, because that's what we want, right? But bringing the control over that ownership and over that life cycle as well, right? When they expired, because
that's true,
right?
Or recertification.
Exactly, a recertification. Absolutely, pushing the accountability over the ownership and the access to the business, but in a very business-friendly way, a non-intrusive way, right? So it doesn't affect the adoption.
And that's the thing, right? Again, we want to empower people, but sometimes people don't know what they're doing. For example, if you create a team, it creates a new SharePoint site collection. I mean, last I checked, we don't give people a site collection, right? But the way Teams work, everybody gets a site collection. So how do you deal with people changing permission, creating subsites, creating workflows they're not supposed to? And you got to find that balance, right? And then for lifecycle, in your case, how do you think about lifecycle? Like when they're done with a project, what happens to the SharePoint site or the team? Is there a formal closure? Do you archive it? How do you do it?
We don't have any automatic jobs for that. It's based on the users and on the owners of the spaces, for example, of the site on the SharePoint. So their responsibility is to tell to us, to the IT, that yes, we are done with this project. Please archive it, and also please delete this. So currently no automation on this. I think that there is a huge potential for example, some expiration policies and some automatic archiving. And I think that on today, on some keynotes earlier, we saw some things that can be done in the teams, and these tasks can be automated, either via the graphical user interface in the Office 365 administration, but also via the PowerShell. And I think that this is the way, for example, for our internal management system that can use and utilize this remote APIs and work with the Office 365.
And especially if you want to grow and scale, right? And I think that's the third most important thing is think about the full information lifecycle and end of life. Because the last thing you want is you have all these teams all over, and now you're bounded by policies and GDPR, you know, right to forget, or things that you're supposed to keep because of Sarbanes-Oxley for 7 years. So, you know, in the end, when we think about governance, it's three things: provisioning, the management of these workspaces and data, and then your information lifecycle. You know, I hope this was beneficial to everybody watching, and I'm sure your insights are helpful. If you have one tip, just one practical tip around governing teams, what would that be? Who wants to go? Like, one thing they could do today just to, you know, have a handle on governance, what would that be?
Okay, as we don't have much experiences with the teams,
or even with SharePoint, Office 365.
Yes, I put in Morgan with the SharePoint, and that means educate your users to not spawn the environment, at least not as much as they are without the education.
Got it. Peter?
I would say automation is the key.
Automation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Automation is it's probably number one. Thing for us, and yeah, recertification and pushing the ownership, as I mentioned before.
So education, automation, and for me, again, our job is to make it easy for people to do the right thing. Whatever it takes, right? If it's education, automation, think about that. So with that, thanks everyone for watching. Hopefully you've learned something, and make sure you check out the ESPC site. Tons more videos, tons more content about this. Until the next one, bye.